What would you do if your son suddenly grabbed the microphone in the middle of your sister's lavish wedding and called the groom Dad? In front of hundreds of guests, my little boy exposed a truth my family had spent over a decade trying to bury. I didn't come to ruin anything. But my son, with just one sentence, brought everything crashing down. If you were me in that moment, would you stay silent, or would you stand up and protect your child against an entire family that turned their back on you? My name is Olivia Mitchell. I'm 30 years old, a single mom. I thought I had buried the past for good, until I received a wedding invitation from my sister. And then, at that very wedding, it was my son who forced the entire Whitmore family to finally face the truth. The wedding invitation arrived on a Tuesday, embossed with golden letters and wrapped in an envelope so white it looked almost too perfect to touch. I stared at it for a long time. My name, Olivia Mitchell, handwritten in elegant cursive that I recognized as my mother's. Not Rachel's. Of course, my sister wouldn't bother addressing her own wedding invitation to me. I watched my 10-year-old son, Ethan, play with his action figures on our small living room floor, completely oblivious to the storm of emotions raging inside me. Our 2-bedroom apartment in Boston wasn't much, but we'd made it home after I'd fled San Francisco 5 years ago, pregnant and alone. The invitation wasn't a surprise. Mom had been calling for weeks, insisting that I needed to be there, that family should stick together, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. What was surprising was that Rachel had agreed to invite me at all. My perfect younger sister, who'd always been our parents' favorite, was now marrying into one of Boston's wealthiest families. Rachel, with her Harvard law degree and flawless appearance, was about to become Mrs. William Prescott III. "Mom, is something wrong?" Ethan's voice pulled me from my thoughts. Those inquisitive blue eyes, so much like his father's, looked up at me with concern beyond his years. "It's from Aunt Rachel," I said, trying to sound casual. "She's getting married next month." Ethan's face lit up. "Are we going? I've never been to a fancy wedding." I wanted to say no. God, how I wanted to say no. The thought of seeing my family again, of standing in a room where I'd be measured and found wanting, made my stomach churn. But there was Ethan to consider. He deserved to know his family, even if that family had barely acknowledged his existence for the past decade. "Yes," I finally said, "we're going." Little did I know that decision would unravel secrets my family had kept buried for years. The Prescott estate was exactly what you'd expect from old Boston money. Sprawling gardens, a mansion that looked like it belonged in a period drama, and staff that moved like well-orchestrated shadows. Ethan's eyes grew wide as we passed through the ornate iron gates, his small hand clutching mine tightly. "Mom, this is like a castle," he whispered. I forced a smile. "It is pretty impressive, isn't it?" We followed the signs to the guest check-in, where a young woman in a sleek black dress sat behind a table covered in place cards. Her professional smile faltered slightly when I gave her my name. "Olivia Mitchell? Just a moment, please." She disappeared briefly, whispering with an older woman who kept glancing in my direction. When she returned, her smile was even more strained. "Here you are, Miss Mitchell, and Ethan Mitchell." She handed us our place cards as if they might contaminate her. I looked down at the cards and felt my heart sink. Table 19. I knew the layout of wedding receptions well enough to recognize what that meant. We were seated as far from the wedding party as physically possible while still technically being in the same room. As if that wasn't clear enough, I flipped over my place card and saw what was handwritten on the back in tiny, meticulous script. "Single mother, Rachel's mistake." My hands began to shake. Ethan, always observant, reached for the card. "What does it say, Mom?" I quickly flipped it back over. "Nothing important, honey. Just table numbers." "Why are your hands shaking?" Before I could answer, a familiar voice called my name. My mother, Catherine Mitchell, immaculate in a pale blue dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, approached with arms outstretched. "Olivia, darling, you came!" She air-kissed both my cheeks, careful not to smudge her makeup. Her eyes fell on Ethan, and something flickered across her face. Discomfort, maybe even shame. "And this must be Ethan. My, how you've grown." She said it as if she'd seen him more than the 3 times in his entire life, as if she hadn't refused to attend his birth because she was too busy with a charity function. "Hello, Grandma," Ethan said politely, extending his hand like I'd taught him. My mother looked momentarily taken aback by his formality, then gave his hand the briefest of shakes. "Well, isn't he proper?" "Where's Dad?" I asked, desperate to change the subject. "Mingling with the Prescotts. You know how important this marriage, is for everyone." She glanced over her shoulder. "Rachel is getting ready. She looks absolutely breathtaking." "I'm sure she does," I said, meaning it. Rachel had always been beautiful. "Olivia," my mother lowered her voice, leaning in. "I'm so glad you're here, but please, don't make a scene. This day means everything to your sister, to all of us." Before I could respond, she was interrupted by a tall, distinguished man who appeared at her side. William Prescott II, the father of the groom. "Catherine, the photographer is looking for the mother of the bride," he said, barely acknowledging my presence. "Of course, Olivia, we'll catch up later." And just like that, she was gone, leaving Ethan and me standing awkwardly with our place cards. Ethan tugged at my dress. "Mom, why was Grandma acting weird?" I sighed, kneeling to his level. Sometimes grown-ups forget how to act around people they haven't seen in a while. "She doesn't like us much, does she?" His perceptiveness cut straight to my heart. "It's complicated, honey. But hey," I forced brightness into my voice. "Let's go find our seats for the ceremony." As we made our way to the garden where the ceremony would take place, I spotted my father, Robert Mitchell, speaking with a group of men in expensive suits. His eyes met mine briefly, and for a moment I thought he might come over. Instead, he gave me a curt nod and turned back to his conversation. Table 19 and a cruel note on the back of a place card suddenly seemed like just the beginning of what would be a very long day. The ceremony was picture perfect, as I knew it would be. Rachel walked down the aisle in a gown that must have cost as much as a car, her blonde hair styled in an elegant updo that showcased the diamond earrings that had once belonged to our grandmother. Mom cried photogenic tears. Dad beamed with pride. The Prescotts looked suitably impressed with their new addition to the family. I sat in the back row with Ethan, watching it all unfold like a movie I wasn't really part of. The vows were exchanged, the rings slipped onto fingers, and just like that, Rachel became Mrs. William Prescott III. The reception was held in the grand ballroom of the estate. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over tables draped in silk, each centerpiece more elaborate than the last. Except for table 19. Our table was smaller, tucked against a wall near the kitchen doors, with a simple arrangement that looked like an afterthought. "Mom, why are we sitting all the way over here?" Ethan asked as we took our seats. We were joined by a distant cousin no one spoke to after his divorce, an elderly great-aunt who was hard of hearing, and a couple who I suspected were only invited because the bride's father did business with them. "It's just how the seating worked out," I lied, helping him adjust his tie. Dinner was served, speeches were made, and I did my best to blend into the background. Ethan, however, was fascinated by everything: the live band, the ice sculpture, the chocolate fountain. "Can I go look at the chocolate thing?" he asked after finishing his chicken. "Sure, but stay where I can see you, okay?" As he darted off, I noticed Rachel moving between tables, accepting congratulations with practiced grace. She was headed in our direction, and my stomach tightened. We hadn't spoken directly in nearly 5 years, not since that awful Christmas when she'd asked me not to bring my situation to our parents' house. "Olivia," she said when she reached our table, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "I'm glad you could make it." "Congratulations," I replied. "The ceremony was beautiful." "Thank you." She glanced around. "Where's your son?" "Ethan. His name is Ethan. He's at the chocolate fountain." Something shifted in her expression. "Right, Ethan." She lowered her voice. "I hope you understand why we seated you here. William's family, they're very traditional. The whole single mother thing doesn't exactly fit their image of the perfect family union." I felt heat rise to my face. Is that why someone wrote Rachel's mistake on my place card? Her eyes widened slightly. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" I challenged, feeling years of hurt bubbling to the surface. "Just like you don't know why Mom and Dad have barely acknowledged their grandson's existence for the past decade? Or why Dad couldn't even look at me when we arrived?" Rachel's perfect composure cracked, just for a moment. "This is my wedding day, Olivia. Don't make it about your issues." "My issues?" I almost laughed. "Is that what we're calling it now?" She leaned in, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "You got pregnant by a married man, Olivia. You threw away your career and embarrassed this family. And now you show up here with the living proof of your mistake and expect—" "Don't you dare call my son a mistake." I cut her off, my voice dangerously low. "Ethan is the best thing that ever happened to me." Rachel straightened, smoothing her dress. "Fine. Believe whatever makes you feel better about your choices. Just stay out of the way for the rest of the evening. William's family doesn't need to know all the sordid details." As she walked away, I noticed Ethan standing a few feet away, a small plate of chocolate-covered strawberries in his hands, his eyes wide. My heart sank. How much had he heard? "Mom?" His voice was small. What did Aunt Rachel mean about me being a mistake? Before I could answer, the band started playing loudly, announcing the first dance. I pulled Ethan close, fighting back tears. "You are not a mistake," I whispered fiercely. "You are the most perfect, wonderful thing in my life, and don't you ever let anyone tell you differently." He nodded, but I could see the hurt in his eyes. In that moment, I wanted nothing more than to grab his hand and leave this place, these people who had written us off so easily, but something kept me rooted to my chair. Pride, maybe, or the stubborn belief that I deserved to be here just as much as anyone else. The evening progressed, and I watched as my family carried on as if we weren't there. Mom and Dad danced, laughed, posed for photos, the picture-perfect parents of the bride. Not once did they come to our table, not even to say hello to their grandson. When the dessert course was being served, I excused myself to the restroom, needing a moment alone to collect myself. As I stood in front of the mirror, fixing my makeup and the brave face I'd been wearing all night, the door opened, and in walked Elizabeth Prescott, William's mother. She assessed me coolly before moving to the sink beside mine. "You must be the other Mitchell daughter." "Olivia," I supplied, though I suspected she knew exactly who I was. She reapplied her lipstick with precision. "Catherine told me about you. Such a shame when young women make unfortunate decisions." The way she said it made my skin crawl. "I don't consider my son unfortunate in any way." Elizabeth's eyebrow arched. "Of course not, but surely you understand why we needed to be discreet about certain aspects of Rachel's family. The Prescott name carries weight in this city." And what exactly would taint that precious name? A nephew? A child? I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. She snapped her compact shut. A bastard born of an affair with a married man doesn't quite fit the Prescott family narrative, my dear. The word bastard hit me like a slap. Before I could respond, she continued. I insisted that Rachel not include you in the wedding party. Photographs are so permanent, you understand. But she assured me you'd be kept at an appropriate distance. She moved toward the door, then paused. I do hope your boy takes after his mother rather than his father. The Prescotts don't need any more complications. The door closed behind her, and I stood frozen, her words echoing in my head. The casual cruelty, the disdain, the way she spoke about Ethan as if he were a stain to be hidden. It was almost too much to bear. When I returned to the table, I found Ethan sitting alone, pushing cake around his plate. Hey, buddy, I said, trying to inject cheerfulness into my voice. Not hungry anymore? He shook his head. Mom, while you were gone, this boy came over. He said his dad told him not to talk to me because I don't have a dad, and that makes me weird. My heart shattered. Oh, Ethan. Why don't I have a dad, Mom? You never talk about him. Is it because he didn't want me? Is that why Aunt Rachel called me a mistake? The questions I'd been dreading for years, delivered in the middle of a wedding reception where we were clearly unwelcome. I took a deep breath and took his hands in mine. Your father. It's complicated, honey. But none of it is your fault. And you are not a mistake. You are the best decision I ever made. His eyes, so searching and intelligent, studied my face. But who is he? Does he know about me? Is he here? The last question caught me off guard. Here? No, why would you think that? Ethan shrugged. I just thought, since it's a family thing, and he's my family too, right? It's not that simple. I glanced around the ballroom, feeling suddenly exposed. Let's talk about this at home, okay? But Ethan had that determined look I knew too well. You always say that, but we never do. I want to know now. I deserve to know who my dad is. It was then that the room fell silent as the wedding planner announced it was time for toasts. The best man stood first, followed by the maid of honor. Then, to my surprise, my father took the microphone. When my little girl Rachel was born, he began, his voice thick with emotion. I knew she was destined for greatness. She's always made the right choices, always made our family proud. I felt each word like a knife. The implication was clear, unlike her sister. And now she's joined our family with the Prescotts, two of Boston's finest families united. Nothing could make a father more proud than seeing his daughter make something so perfect of her life. Beside me, Ethan tensed. I squeezed his hand, trying to communicate without words that it was okay, that we didn't need their approval. As applause filled the room, the wedding planner announced an open mic for anyone who wanted to offer congratulations to the happy couple. Several guests took turns sharing anecdotes and well wishes. Then, to my horror, I saw Ethan stand up. I'd like to say something, he announced, his voice carrying across the now hushed room. My heart stopped. Ethan, what are you doing? I whispered urgently, but he was already making his way toward the microphone. The wedding planner looked uncertainly at Rachel, who gave a tight nod, probably not wanting to cause a scene by refusing her nephew. Ethan took the microphone, standing tall despite his small stature. Hi, I'm Ethan, Aunt Rachel's nephew. A murmur went through the crowd. I saw my mother's hand fly to her throat, my father's face darken, and Rachel exchange a panicked glance with her new husband. I just wanted to say congratulations, Ethan continued, his voice steady even as I could see his hands trembling. And I also wanted to say, thank you for inviting me and my mom, even though I heard someone call me a mistake and a word I'm not supposed to say. Gasps rippled through the audience. Elizabeth Prescott's face went rigid with fury. My mom says I'm not a mistake, but nobody here talks to us or even looks at us. So I think maybe you all think I am. His voice wavered slightly. But I just want you to know that my mom is the best mom ever, and she works 2 jobs to take care of me, and she helps me with my homework even when she's really tired. Tears pricked at my eyes. I wanted to go to him, to stop this before it got worse, but I was rooted to my seat, watching my brave, beautiful boy stand up for us both. And I know you all don't like that I don't have a dad, but that's not my fault. I didn't choose that, and it's not my mom's fault either, because... He paused, and for a moment, I thought he might stop. Then he squared his shoulders and said the words that would change everything. Because my dad didn't tell her he was already married until after she was already having me, and that was a really mean thing to do. The room went completely silent. I finally found the strength to stand, to go to my son, when Ethan delivered the final blow. So I don't think it's fair for everyone to be mad at my mom when my dad is the one who lied, especially since he's here right now and no one's mad at him at all. The silence that followed Ethan's words was deafening. I stood frozen halfway between our table and the microphone, my heart hammering so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. "Ethan," I finally managed, my voice strained. "That's enough. Come here, please." But he wasn't looking at me. His gaze was fixed somewhere across the room, and as I followed it, I felt the floor drop out from under me. William Prescott III, the groom, had gone pale as death, his champagne glass suspended halfway to his lips. "What did he say?" Rachel's voice cut through the silence, high and brittle. She looked from Ethan to her new husband. "Will?" Will couldn't seem to form words. His father stepped forward, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "This is absurd. The boy is clearly confused. Perhaps it's time the child and his mother left." "I'm not confused," Ethan said, still holding the microphone. "My mom has a picture of her and my dad from before I was born. He looks exactly like him." He pointed directly at Will. "And he has the same blue eyes as me." The room erupted. Rachel let out a sound somewhere between a gasp and a scream. Elizabeth Prescott looked as though she might faint. My father stormed toward the microphone, his face purple with rage. I finally reached Ethan, gently taking the microphone from his hands. "I'm so sorry," I whispered, though I wasn't sure who I was apologizing to. My son, my sister, or the room full of shocked guests. "Is it true?" Rachel's voice cut through the chaos. She had moved to stand directly in front of me, her perfect makeup streaked with tears, her hands shaking. "Is Will the father of your son?" I couldn't speak. The secret I'd kept for 10 years, that my son's father was William Prescott III, the man who had told me he was single when we met, the man who disappeared from my life when I told him I was pregnant, the man who turned out to be engaged to my own sister, was now exposed in the most public, painful way possible. "Will!" Rachel turned to her husband, who still stood frozen. "Tell me this isn't true. Tell me you didn't—" "I didn't know." Will finally spoke, his eyes fixed on me. "Olivia, I swear I didn't know it was you. When Rachel talked about her estranged sister, she never used your name. And when we met, you were using your mother's maiden name, Taylor." "You knew very well who I was," I said, finding my voice at last. "You just didn't care enough to remember." "Wait!" Rachel's voice shook. "You two? You knew each other? Before today?" 10 years ago, I answered, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. "We met at a conference in San Francisco. He said his name was just Will, that he was single, that he worked in finance. We were together for 3 months before I found out I was pregnant. When I told him, he disappeared, changed his number. I tried to find him, but all I had was Will from Boston, who works in finance. It wasn't until I saw your engagement announcement in the paper with his full name and picture that I realized who he really was. Rachel's face crumpled. And you didn't tell me? You knew I was marrying the man who abandoned you and his child, and you said nothing? Would you have believed me? I asked quietly. You, who just called my son a mistake not an hour ago? You, who've spent the last decade pretending I barely exist? Before Rachel could respond, Elizabeth Prescott stepped forward, her voice icy calm. This is preposterous. This woman is clearly after the Prescott fortune. William, say nothing further. We'll handle this privately after legal counsel. There's an easy way to know for sure, my mother spoke up, her voice strangely steady. She'd moved to stand beside Ethan, looking at him closely for perhaps the first time. The boy is the spitting image of Will at that age. Those eyes. They're the Prescott eyes. William Prescott II stepped forward, finally looking, truly looking, at his potential grandson. Something flickered across his face, a recognition that couldn't be denied. Elizabeth, he said quietly. The boy looks exactly like the portrait of Will that hangs in our study, right down to that cleft in his chin. Will himself seemed to have unfrozen. He moved toward Ethan, stopping a respectful distance away. How old are you, Ethan? 10, Ethan answered steadily. My birthday is March 15th. I saw Will doing the math in his head, matching it to when we'd known each other. His face told me he'd reached the only possible conclusion. Why didn't you tell me? He asked me, his voice raw. I tried, I said simply. You blocked my number. You moved. You made it very clear you wanted nothing to do with us. I panicked, he admitted. I was engaged to Rachel. It was arranged by our families years before. I never imagined. Rachel made a sound like a wounded animal. You cheated on me with my sister? Is that what you're saying? No. Will looked desperate. It wasn't like that. We were on a break, Rachel. Remember? You'd gone to Paris for that internship, and we agreed to see other people. It was right after college. We weren't even sure we were going to go through with the engagement. That doesn't explain why you abandoned your child, my father said, surprising me. Robert Mitchell had never defended me in my adult life, yet here he was, glaring at Will with unmistakable disgust. I was a coward, Will admitted. When Olivia told me she was pregnant, all I could think about was what it would mean for my family, for the merger between our companies that depended on my marriage to Rachel. I convinced myself she'd be better off without me. You were right about that, I said bitterly. Ethan, who had been watching this exchange with wide eyes, suddenly spoke. So, you are my dad? For real? The simple question cut through the tension like a knife. Will looked at my son, his son, and something in his expression softened. Yes, he said quietly. I think I am. Rachel let out a strangled laugh. Well, isn't this perfect? I just married my nephew's father. I'm what, his stepmother now? His aunt? Both? She turned to me, her eyes wild. Did you plan this? Was this your revenge? Letting me marry him without telling me, then humiliating me at my own wedding? Rachel, no. I reached for her, but she jerked away. Don't touch me, she hissed. You've done enough. She turned to the stunned guests, her voice taking on a high, manic quality. Thank you all for coming to celebrate this farce of a marriage. As you can see, the Prescotts and Mitchells are indeed united, just not in the way we thought. Please enjoy the cake while my husband figures out whether he prefers his wife or his son and the woman he knocked up a decade ago." And with that, she flung her bouquet to the ground and stormed out of the ballroom, leaving a wake of stunned silence behind her. The aftermath was chaos. Guests whispered in scandalized clusters. The Prescott family huddled in furious conversation, and my mother appeared to be having a heated argument with my father, who kept pointing at Will with undisguised contempt. I knelt beside Ethan, who looked both triumphant and terrified. "How did you know?" I asked quietly. "How did you realize Will was your father?" He pulled out his phone and showed me a photo, an old picture of Will and me that I kept hidden in my nightstand drawer. "I found this in your room when I was looking for tape. He looks just like the man in Aunt Rachel's pictures online, and—" He hesitated. "I heard you crying one night, talking to Aunt Lisa on the phone about him, about Will." My heart sank. How much had he overheard over the years? How long had he been piecing this puzzle together? "I didn't mean for it to happen like this," I whispered. "I know." He looked at me with those wise eyes. "But they were being really mean to you, Mom. And that lady called me a bad word." I pulled him into a tight hug, tears streaming down my face. "You were so brave, but we need to go now, okay?" As I gathered our things, Elizabeth Prescott approached, her face a mask of barely contained fury. "This display was utterly disgraceful," she hissed. "If you think this stunt will result in any form of settlement or acknowledgement, you are sorely mistaken. Our legal team will be in touch, I'm sure." I cut her off, too exhausted for more confrontation. "Come on, Ethan. We're leaving." We had barely made it to the exit when Will caught up to us. His tie loosened, his face haggard. "Olivia, wait. Please." I stopped but didn't turn. "There's nothing left to say, Will." "There's 10 years' worth to say," he insisted, moving to face me. "I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but please don't leave like this. Let me at least talk to him. To my son." The words "my son" in his mouth made my blood boil. "Now you want to be a father? After a decade of silence? After marrying my sister?" Will flinched. "I didn't know he was mine when I married Rachel. I swear to you, I had no idea." "Would it have mattered if you did?" I challenged. He didn't answer, which was answer enough. "That's what I thought," I said, moving past him. "Mom!" Ethan tugged at my hand. "Can I talk to him? Just for a minute?" I looked down at my son's pleading face and felt my resolve weaken. He'd spent his whole life wondering about the father-shaped hole in his life. Could I really deny him this moment, regardless of my own feelings? "5 minutes," I conceded, "and I'll be right here." Will's face softened with relief. He knelt to Ethan's level, seeming unsure how to begin. "Hi, Ethan. I don't really know what to say. I'm sorry seems insufficient." "Did you know about me?" Ethan asked directly. "Before today?" Will hesitated, then shook his head. "No, your mother tried to tell me, but I made it impossible for her to reach me." "Why?" The simple question seemed to strike Will like a physical blow. "Because I was scared and selfish. I made a terrible mistake, and it cost me the chance to know you." Ethan considered this. "Do you want to know me now, or is it just because everyone found out?" I winced at my son's perceptiveness. Will looked equally stricken. "I want to know you," he said after a moment. "I know I don't deserve the chance, but if you're willing, I'd like to try." Ethan looked back at me, seeking guidance. I forced myself to remain neutral. This had to be his decision. "I'll think about it." Ethan finally said, with a maturity that broke my heart a little. I need to talk to my mom first. Will nodded, standing up. That's fair. More than fair. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, offering it to Ethan. If you decide you want to talk, or ask questions, or anything at all, you can reach me here. Anytime. Ethan took the card carefully, as if it might bite him. Okay. Will turned to me. Olivia, Don't, I interrupted. Whatever you're about to say, save it. Today isn't about you and me. It's about Ethan. You're right. He stepped back. But I want you to know, I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. For him, and for you. 10 years too late, I said, but the venom had drained from my voice, leaving only exhaustion. Goodbye, Will. I took Ethan's hand, and we walked out of the Prescott estate without looking back. As our taxi pulled away, I saw my mother standing at the entrance. Her perfect composure finally cracked, watching us leave with an expression I couldn't quite read. The drive back to our apartment was silent, both of us processing the events of the day. It wasn't until we were home, Ethan changed into his pajamas and me into sweatpants, that he finally spoke. Are you mad at me, Mom? I sat beside him on his bed. No, honey. I could never be mad at you for wanting to know the truth. But I ruined Aunt Rachel's wedding. I sighed. What happened today? It was complicated, and it wasn't your fault. It was adult problems that should have been resolved long ago. Are we in trouble now? That scary lady seemed really mad. I smiled despite everything. Elizabeth Prescott is scary, isn't she? But no, we're not in trouble. We haven't done anything wrong. Ethan fidgeted with his blanket. Do you think he really wants to know me? My dad? The question hung in the air, weighted with hope and fear. I think, I said carefully, that he's going to have to prove it. Words are easy. Actions are what matter. Like how you always show up, even when you're super tired? I felt tears prick my eyes. Yeah, like that. Ethan was quiet for a moment, then asked, Did you love him, back then? It was a question I'd asked myself countless times over the years. I thought I did, I answered honestly. I thought he was someone else, someone better. But I've never regretted having you. Not for a single second. He nodded, seeming satisfied with my answer. Mom, can I keep his card? Just in case? I hesitated, but nodded. It's your choice, Ethan. Just be careful with your heart, okay? Not everyone deserves a place in it. As I tucked him in, my phone began buzzing with incoming calls and messages. My mother, my father, even Rachel. I silenced it and set it aside. Whatever they had to say could wait until tomorrow. Tonight was for Ethan and me, in our small, peaceful home that felt more like safety than any mansion ever could. 3 days after the wedding disaster, as the media frenzy began to die down, turns out, the scandalous implosion of a marriage between two prominent Boston families makes for excellent tabloid fodder. I received a visitor I never expected. I was sorting through the mountain of mail that had accumulated. A mix of sympathy cards from distant acquaintances, demands for exclusives from gossip magazines, and, most disturbingly, legal letters from the Prescott's attorneys, when there was a knock at the door. Ethan was at school, so I approached warily, checking the peephole. My breath caught in my throat. It was my mother. Catherine Mitchell stood in the hallway of my modest apartment building, looking decidedly out of place in her designer suit and pearls. I hesitated, then slowly opened the door. Mom? I said, not bothering to hide my surprise. What are you doing here? She seemed to struggle with what to say, her perfectly manicured hands clasping and unclasping her handbag. "May I come in?" I stepped aside, allowing her to enter. She took in my small living room with a single sweeping glance, her expression unreadable. "Would you like some tea?" I offered, more out of ingrained politeness than genuine hospitality. "Yes, thank you," she said, perching herself carefully on the edge of my second-hand sofa. I busied myself in the kitchen, grateful for the moment to collect my thoughts. When I returned with 2 mugs, my mother was holding a framed photo of Ethan from his last birthday. "He looks so much like him," she murmured, so quietly I almost didn't hear. "Like Will, you mean?" I placed her tea on the coffee table. She shook her head slowly. "No, like Thomas." I froze, the name hitting me like a physical blow. "What did you say?" My mother set the photo down carefully and looked me directly in the eyes. "He looks like Thomas Prescott, Will's uncle, his father's younger brother." I sank into the chair across from her, my mind reeling. "Mom, what are you talking about?" She took a deep breath, seeming to steel herself. "There's something you need to know, Olivia. Something I should have told you years ago. About Thomas. About me. And about why your father and I reacted the way we did when you became pregnant." My hands began to tremble. "Mom, please, let me get this out." She closed her eyes briefly, as if gathering strength. "35 years ago, I had an affair with Thomas Prescott. Your father and I were going through a rough patch. William Sr. and Robert were negotiating their first major business merger. I felt invisible, unappreciated. Thomas was kind, attentive, everything Robert wasn't at that time." My mouth went dry. "What are you saying?" "The affair lasted 6 months. When I discovered I was pregnant, I was terrified. Robert and I hadn't been intimate in that period. There was no way the child could be his." I felt as though the floor was tilting beneath me. "The child? You mean Rachel?" The name fell from her lips like a stone. "Rachel is Thomas Prescott's biological daughter." The world seemed to stop. "But that would mean Will and Rachel are cousins." "Yes." My mother's voice was barely above a whisper. "And your son is Thomas's grandson?" I stood up abruptly, nearly knocking over my tea. "That's impossible. Dad always doted on Rachel. He clearly had no idea. He knew." My mother's voice was flat. "Not at first. I tried to pass her off as his, but when she was born, those Prescott blue eyes, he knew immediately. It nearly destroyed him. Destroyed us. But then something unexpected happened." "What?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear more. "William Prescott Sr. found out. Thomas had confessed to his brother in a moment of guilt. Instead of the scandal we expected, William saw an opportunity. The Prescott and Mitchell businesses were both struggling at the time. A merger would save both families financially, but the negotiations had stalled. William proposed a solution. A contract binding our families forever." "A contract?" I repeated numbly. "What kind of contract?" "Rachel would be raised as Robert's daughter. The affair would never be mentioned again. Thomas would be sent to manage the European branches of the company. And when Rachel came of age, she would marry Will, uniting the 2 families permanently. In exchange, the merger would proceed on terms highly favorable to your father." I felt physically ill. "You sold your daughter into an arranged marriage with her own cousin?" "We didn't see it that way," my mother defended weakly. First cousins once removed, technically, and the marriage was only suggested, not required. Suggested? I laughed bitterly. Is that why you pushed Rachel into every activity Will enjoyed? Why you coincidentally vacationed where the Prescotts did every summer? Why you looked the other way when Dad pressured Rachel to attend the same college as Will? My mother had the grace to look ashamed. We thought we were securing her future. The Prescotts had wealth, influence. Robert treated her as his own, perhaps even favored her to compensate for knowing she wasn't his. And then I got pregnant by Will, I finished, the horrific irony of it all finally sinking in. The very man you'd groomed Rachel to marry, except no one knew he was her cousin. Except Thomas, William Sr., your father, and me, my mother confirmed. We were devastated when you told us about the pregnancy, not just because of the scandal of you being unmarried, but because of the implications. If the truth came out, both families would be ruined. The business empire built on our alliance would crumble. So you cast me out, I said, years of hurt crystallizing into sharp clarity. Treated me and my son like we were nothing. Pushed me away so completely that I never even suspected Rachel was engaged to my child's father. We didn't know he was the father, my mother said quickly. You never told us his name. If we'd known... God, Olivia, if we'd known it was Will. What? You would have stopped the wedding? Told Rachel the truth? Acknowledged your grandson? My voice rose with each question. Somehow I doubt that, Mom. She didn't answer directly. Instead, she opened her handbag and withdrew an envelope. Thomas died 3 weeks ago, heart attack in his sleep at his villa in Italy. I blinked at the abrupt change of subject. I didn't know. There was no reason you would. He'd been estranged from the family for decades. By design. She held out the envelope. This came for me after his death. Inside was a letter, and this. I took the envelope cautiously and opened it. Inside was a DNA test result and a handwritten note. The DNA test showed a conclusive match between Thomas Prescott and Rachel Mitchell. The note read simply, "The truth deserves to be free. I'm sorry for my cowardice. T." William Sr. kept his brother's existence minimized in family records to protect the secret, my mother explained. But Thomas must have done this test privately, preparing for his death. He wanted the truth to come out. And yet you still went ahead with the wedding, I said, my voice hollow. Knowing they were cousins, knowing about the DNA test. We didn't receive this until the morning after the ceremony, my mother insisted. By then it was too late, or so we thought. She paused. Until Ethan spoke up. I sank back into my chair, trying to process the magnitude of what I'd just learned. My sister was actually my half-sister. The father of my child was my half-sister's cousin. The web of lies and secrets spun by our parents had entangled us all, with Ethan caught in the middle. Does Rachel know? I finally asked. Not yet. She secluded herself at the Prescott summer home, not answering calls. My mother looked down at her hands. Will knows. His father told him yesterday. And what does the mighty William Prescott Jr. plan to do about his son marrying his niece? I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. Annulment, immediately. They're citing fraud, claiming Rachel knew all along and married Will to secure Prescott assets. My mother's voice broke. It's all falling apart, Olivia. Everything we built. And the worst part is, we deserve it. I stared at her. This woman who had helped orchestrate a decades-long deception that had wounded so many lives. My mother, who had chosen status and money over the well-being of her daughters and grandson. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. What do you want from me? She met my gaze, tears finally spilling onto her perfectly made-up face. Because you and Ethan deserve to know the truth. And because... She hesitated. Because I want a chance to make amends. To be a grandmother to Ethan. To be a mother to you again, if you'll let me. I laughed, the sound sharp and disbelieving. Just like that? After a decade of treating us like we were nothing? After what you've done? No, she shook her head. Not just like that. I know it will take time, if it's even possible at all. But Olivia, seeing Ethan stand up at that wedding, hearing him defend you, watching him walk away with his head high despite how we'd treated him, it broke something in me, made me see what I've become, what we've all become. She reached for my hand, and to my surprise, I didn't pull away. He's extraordinary. You've raised an extraordinary boy, all on your own. While I was busy protecting a lie, you were building something real and beautiful, and I've missed it all. I wanted to stay angry. Wanted to throw her tearful apology back in her face, but the exhaustion of holding on to that anger for so many years suddenly overwhelmed me. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said honestly. I don't know if Ethan will want anything to do with you once he knows the truth. I understand, she said, and for the first time in my adult life, I believed she actually did. But I had to try. For what it's worth, I am truly sorry, Olivia. We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of decades of secrets hanging between us. Finally, I asked the question that had been burning in my mind. What happens now? My mother dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. William Sr. is in poor health. The shock of all this? It's not good. The family businesses are in chaos. Your father is trying to distance himself from the Prescotts, but their fates are too intertwined. And Will? What does he plan to do about Ethan? She hesitated. He wants to meet with you. Both of you. He's conflicted, as you can imagine. Finding out about Ethan, then discovering Rachel is his cousin, all within days of each other. He made his choice 10 years ago, I said, but with less conviction than before. Perhaps. My mother stood, smoothing her skirt. But people can change, Olivia. Sometimes it takes losing everything to realize what matters. She moved toward the door, then paused. Will you tell Ethan about all of this? I thought about my son, who had already endured so much, who had shown more courage and integrity at 10 than most of the adults in his life. Yes, I decided. He deserves the truth, the whole truth. No more secrets. My mother nodded, accepting this. You're a good mother, Olivia. Better than I ever was. With that, she left, closing the door quietly behind her. I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by the fragments of a truth that had been hidden for over 3 decades. The DNA test results lay on my coffee table, proof of a deception that had shaped all our lives. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from an unknown number. Olivia, it's Will. We need to talk. Not just about Ethan, about everything. Please. I stared at the message for a long time before finally typing a response. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., the park near our apartment. Ethan will decide if he wants to see you. As I hit send, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the first step toward whatever came next. The truth was finally out in the open, painful as it was. What we built from those broken pieces would be up to us.